All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, I haven't really done this much before, but I just figured I'd go live. I'm looking at weather models today, just getting an idea of how things are going to unfold over this week or next week, and I figured it would be a little bit interesting this time to kind of look at the models, but I haven't really looked at them at all just yet. So what I'm going to be doing here is kind of just a breakdown of what I'm observing on the models as I go through them. And I figured that might be just something good to go live. Feel free to chime in with questions about different things as I go through this. But I think I'm live on YouTube and on Facebook at this time. So let's dive right in with what we got. All right, so I am looking here at the Storm Prediction Center's website. So what we have is the Day 1 convective outlook. As you can see, nothing really on tap for the Great Lakes region in terms of severe weather based on what they're saying. I am seeing a potential for a few thunderstorms in the Upper Peninsula and Wisconsin, or at least the SPC is seeing that at this current moment, and also portions of southern Indiana and southern Ohio. I do know that portions of Indiana got a lot of rain yesterday with a complex that went through, and then also some portions of Ohio saw the remnants of that as it went through as well. What I was looking at a little bit earlier though, and this is why I'm kind of doing a little bit of live, is a few opportunities for maybe some severe weather across portions of the Upper Peninsula tomorrow, and then maybe portions of lower Michigan on Wednesday, and then getting down into northern Indiana, northern Ohio Thursday, and then southern Ohio on Friday. And the potential exists that I might be chasing Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So I'm kind of just doing this live because I want to break it down and show you kind of what I do as I look at the potential for these types of events. So we're going to go to the Day 2 outlook. See what's going on there. You can see there is a marginal risk for severe weather now in place across portions of the Upper Peninsula, Wisconsin. Again, there is potential for some storms to form along a boundary that will exist over the Upper Peninsula. This could also include places that I was at last week. That includes the Keweenaw Peninsula, Skaney region, and then areas down towards Amasa, Alpha, Crystal Falls, those places. That's the marginal risk area there. And again, really primary threat there looks to be damaging winds once again. We'll have to look at some of the models and get an idea of how that could potentially unfold. Day 3, you can see a marginal risk is kind of broadly placed across portions of the Midwest and the Plains. Some models are hinting at some potential for severe weather across portions of western Michigan also. So that's something that we're watching out for too. Yeah, Jazz, could be a busy week. We'll have to see how things go. But Day 4 through 8, again, the Storm Prediction Center is not really putting out anything with regards to that, mainly because there is a very difficult scenario with predictability, and that's going to be the case for much of these setups that we have in July and August, because again, the summer pattern, you get hot, humid air, and then you get maybe a little bit of shear in some places. It's difficult to determine exactly how things will unfold even with the models, because there's not really any well-defined, I guess, mesoscale patterns that will be in place. However, there will be a couple short waves that make their way through portions of the Great Lakes this week, which is why, again, I do think we are trending active. And the CSU MLP model, which again does depict the potential based on the model outputs, it is depicting a few days of severe weather. And again, you can see Thursday and Friday, the CSU MLP is depicting that slight chance for severe thunderstorms across portions of northern Indiana, northwest Ohio, and then down into southern Ohio on Friday. So that's kind of where I'm drawing a little bit of my, drawing a little bit of my attention to with the models that I'll be looking at with this particular live feed. So Thursday, Friday, but again, potential for severe weather, kind of showing itself. And then Wednesday, you can see that I just shifted back further to the west, kind of following along with what the Storm Prediction Center is saying as well. So, but we're looking at potential for multiple days of severe weather across portions of the Great Lakes region. Again, is that for certain yet? Absolutely not. But there are some signals that could be indicating so. Now, I'm going to look at a few models here. I haven't looked at the Euro or the GFS yet. I've really only been paying attention to the NAM, which again, it's not always good to look at just one model. So this is why I'm going to look at all the models at this current moment. But here's what we got. Here's the GFS model for Monday afternoon. Okay, this is around Monday at 5 p.m. Again, not too much going to be going on until we get to Tuesday. Tuesday, you're going to have that warm front boundary kind of settling over the peninsula. Get a sounding out ahead of that, showing potential for severe weather, good instability. You got steepening lapse rates. You got some moisture in the atmosphere. Well, you got definitely a good deal of moisture in the atmosphere with temperatures or the dew points in the mid 60s. And then you also have high temperatures in the low 80s. So, again, your shear is not that great, except from the surface to the 3rd kilometer. You've got up into the near 150. Again, surface to 1st kilometer, SRH values 150 is pretty ideal for, or it's the threshold for the potential for maybe a tornado or two. Your supercell composite will be of 2 in this current pattern that you can see on the GFS model. Again, I'm just looking at these models for the first time, so I'm kind of breaking them down as I go here. That's kind of what's happening here. But Wednesday, you have those storms sort of filtering their way through the Upper Peninsula with the rainfall on the backside. And then Wednesday is going to be the day we want to pay attention to for portions of Illinois, Wisconsin, Western Michigan. GFS is kind of playing it a little bit weaker. You get a sounding out ahead of these that are making their way through. Marginal severe potential, you still got instability, you still got you still got some lift in the atmosphere present with this. But again, it's not really looking like a really good scenario for severe weather based on the GFS model. Thursday is the day that we start to pay attention to northern Indiana, northwest Ohio. You can see some of these clusters starting to develop here. GFS plays a little bit further south, but still the margin of severe potential with instability values for around 3,000, which is pretty decent. SRH is still relatively low based on what this model is depicting. And then as we get into Friday, we have that potential returning to portions of southern Ohio once again. The GFS still showing the signal for some thunderstorms with decent instability. Minimal shear, though. So minimal shear really is... Those storms are chaseable, but they won't really do too much without much shear. You can see the wind is practically dead at the surface. You do have some flow aloft, some westerly flow aloft in the upper levels, which could drive some motion in these storms, but it's not really looking too great with regards to that. And then, again, with regards to the weather models, it is difficult to do much with the weather models in these kinds of situations in July and August. So, again, I'm taking all of this with a grain of salt as I do this discussion here. So, let's see. Going to the Euro now. Let's take a look at this particular... Oh. You guys see my screen, right? Hopefully you can see my screen. Okay, yes you can. I just realized that there might be a little issue there. But Euro model. Let's take a look there. So again, Tuesday afternoon, the Euro is showing storms across portions of the Upper Peninsula. Marginal severe potential being shown on the Euro. Cape value is around 1700. You still have kind of a similar pattern to the GFS. A little bit of a capping inversion in the atmosphere, but with that lifting mechanism that is that front, we could see some breaks in that. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But marginal severe potential, you've got a little bit of a arch in the hodograph, but again, your SRH is in the 70s, which again does not meet the best threshold for tornado potential, but you could get a little bit of spin in some of these storms as they move through. So that is for, again, Tuesday evening across northwestern the western UP, and then portions of Wisconsin also included in that as well. I really don't buy this for the Euro, but we'll have to see how that plays out. We'll have to go to the more closer range models. Wednesday, you're seeing that potential for storms across portions of Ohio. Again, Euro's playing it further to the east again as well. Sounding margins for potential. Still some spin in the atmosphere. Cape values of 2,500. Still not, it's not too impressive, but again, you do have a nice gap between the level of free convection and your top of your storm there. Not too much directional shear nor speed shear, but still some shear present that could contribute to these storms. Possibly being stronger sphere, especially since there will be instability at throughout the atmosphere. Now, Wednesday, 5 p.m. This is the Wednesday time frame. Seeing storms develop across portions of southeastern Wisconsin. Those storms are showing a little bit more better tornado potential, better shear, better SRH, good cape. Nice broad gap again. Again, it's that cold front or that low pressure system making its way through. The real question is, will those storms survive as they make it to Indiana and Michigan? And the models won't really handle them too well. But again, you have a low pressure system making its way through. One thing that would probably be good to look at this point is the upper levels and see what's happening in the upper levels of the atmosphere. You got westerly flow, and in the mid levels you don't really have too much. You don't really have too much for pronounced low level jet either, which tends to dampen my thoughts on the potential for a tornado event. But again, models will change as they come. Really, the big thing is the upper levels and the westerly flow. It's not really a southwestern or a northwesterly flow. Northwesterly flows are something we look for this time of year for the potential for derechos. Again, I'm not really seeing that here in this regards. And as you guys are jumping in, feel free to chime in with questions as I go through this. I'm going to be kind of live for just a little while. I'm just looking at the models. I haven't really looked at them much recently, and I have some time to do it now. So just thought I'd do it live with everyone else. So let's go back to the precip output. So we were at hour 69. Thursday, again, what we're watching is for potential for some storms across portions of Indiana and Ohio, which is definitely something I might look at chasing. Not really too much in terms of severe weather potential being shown on the Euro, which again, Euro's getting a little bit out in the farther range here, so it's kind of hard to determine if that is going to actually be the case. Again, model outputs, you can never always be certain with model outputs. They just give you a rough idea of how things could potentially unfold. Thursday, you see those storms quickly kind of die out, probably with the loss of daytime heating. Definitely normal for this time of year. Friday, there's models that are showing potential for some storms developing across portions of Ohio, but models seem to be depicting it a little bit further south at this time. Across portions of Kentucky, probably will not be chasing that far south. But marginal severe potential still being shown by the Euro model, and it's practically showing these storms are getting very close to the ground. But again, it's hard to determine exactly what's going to happen, but there are signals for severe weather, once again, for those of you that are watching right now. Signals for severe weather across portions of Indiana and Ohio Thursday and Friday. That's why I'm kind of doing just a breakdown right now. And it is possible that I will be chasing these things in Indiana and Ohio Thursday and Friday if it so comes down to that possibility. NAM model. NAM model is kind of the one that's been a little bit more robust for portions of Michigan. As you go forward, you can see that Tuesday afternoon into Wednesday, you see those storms develop across portions of the western UP. I was just there last week chasing that one storm near Alpha that did some damage. Again, don't want to see more storms up there that could be strong, but the NAM model tends to be a little bit more intense usually all the time, and it's a shorter range model, so we tend to watch a little bit more carefully. But as you can see, CAPE values are much higher than what is being shown by the globals. Lifted index is -8. Your SRH is increased towards 100. A good spin there. You have that hodograph that's not too wide, but still has that curvature. Supercell composite of 6.4. You got decent amounts of 3 capes, steep lapse rate at the surface to 3 km. Really, what's being shown on the model here is more along the lines of a hail threat. And again, that would be due to the steep lapse rates and the strong lift that will be present with this. Elevated base based on the NAM model. So again, you want a lower base for the potential for tornadoes. But your possible hazard type being shown is tornado, probably due to the amount of SRH that's going to be present and just the overall directional shear that is present at the surface going upwards. So not too much directional shear, but still some that's being shown there. Let's progress it forward by 3Z, which is again around 10 p.m. Still showing marginal tornado potential. Your SRH is gradually going down, as well as your other dynamics that are making this, giving this a tornado potential. You notice out here in Nebraska, Tuesday, you're seeing those storms that are starting to weaken across that region. Those will probably likely die out quickly. And as we get into Wednesday afternoon, you see that low making its way in. I'm not sure how much shear we'll have present with this, but again, looking at this output by the NAM, which again, the NAM is not really the, I guess, that you don't want to take the NAM at face value because it tends to hype things up quite a bit, especially this far out. Hey, Patrick. good to see you here. Just doing a little bit of a model output checkup with this live feed that we got going here. But tornado potential being shown by the NAM. Supercell composite getting higher. SRH values around 100. Decent cape up to 3,800. Steep blast rate at the surface, and very decent directional and speed shear present. So again, the NAM likes to play that in terms of the Wisconsin threat, which again, the Wisconsin threat is very likely going to be much better than places across Michigan. Severe potential, cape values of around 4,300 being shown by the time we get to the afternoon in portions of eastern Wisconsin. The real question then becomes, will those storms cross the lake? And potential is there for some storms to develop across the lake. They will definitely not have as much strength, but there will still be enough instability and maybe even some directional shear and some storm relativity that could be present to foster some severe storms into the atmosphere across Michigan. So that's the question. How will things unfold? Now then, Tuesday becomes the question. Will storms evolve across portions of Indiana and Ohio? That's a time frame I'm going to be watching because there are some signals for that based on the CECMLP. NAM model doesn't really look too great, but we can't really get too far out, except for the fact that the 12Z models are in, and I'm on the 6Z. I just realized that. Oh, the RFS is replacing NAM and RAP at the end of the year. Good news. I mean, well, RFSA I do like quite a bit more too. I'll have to look at the RFS. I haven't really looked at that one yet. But let's take a look at the latest NAM model that has just come in. I just realized that just came in. Surprise. Still showing that tornado potential on Tuesday across portions of the Upper Peninsula, Western UP. Not going to get up there this week. I just was up there last week and chased a storm out there. We're going to go to, oh, that's a southward shift based on the previous model, Wednesday 5 p.m. So we'll get a look sounding there. Again, marginal tornado potential, kind of weakens those SRH values. What time is that at? That's at 5 p.m. Or at least 5 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Wisconsin time. But it looks like it might be a little bit of an MCV type of deal. We'll have to see if that kind of goes through with that. Wow, okay. That's interesting for the NAM to do. What we have here is a little bit of a southward shift in the NAM, and as we get into the late night hours on Thursday, it's showing good instability going all the way up to the upper levels. Cape value is 1760, but what interests me with the NAM is the increase in SRH, telling me that I'm wondering if this will be kind of like a little MCV setup. Let's get a look at some of the low-level jet. Wow, that's different. That's new. So again, it could be that type of scenario where we see an MCV form that could drive some severe weather across portions of the Great Lakes. That would be interesting to kind of follow along with. But again, you're going to have a nice moisture, nice, decent heating with this as well. But not really good lapse rates showing there. Lifted index isn't very high either. But the NAM is going to be, again, that's an interesting little feature that's being portrayed by the NAM. But yeah, I wonder, Jazz, will you get some interesting stuff? Again, as I do this, I keep saying it again, keep in mind, this is going to change a lot. I'm just looking at them from my perspective when I'm usually looking at them when I'm not live, but I figured why not just do it now. So that's very fascinating to me to see how that will unfold. But yeah, Southwest Michigan, and then continues into Eastern Michigan. That interests me. That does interest me based on the NAM. We'll have to watch that and keep that in mind. And then Thursday's setup, it doesn't really look too solid in Indiana and Ohio, except despite the fact the CSU is giving signals. I'll have to look at the RFS in just a minute. In fact, let's do that now. RFSA. Again, a model that's going to be the future of the weather forecasting scenario. Again, the 12Z is just coming in, so I'm not going to really be able to get to that. I think I could probably get to Tuesday. No, I can't. All right, we're going to backtrack to the 6Z. It's a prototype model, but if it's going to be replacing at the end of the year, we can start to put some faith in it, right? So Tuesday is a day to watch in the Western UP. Let's see what the RFS depicts that to be. It depicts a little bit of a later, I guess, setup. We're going to go to this reflectivity graphic. I like that, looking at that one better. There's your storms that unfold across the Western UP, get a sounding out ahead of them. It is the fun part, seeing how it changes. Exactly. That's the beautiful thing about weather. It's always changing. Never can be certain about things, right? Love that kind of thing. It's very dynamic. But progressing forward, doesn't really play out this threat in the Western UP too well. It kind of just displays a little bit of a linear mode of storms that could have some pockets of clusters with maybe an embedded supercell or two. As you get further into Wisconsin, though, the threat tends to get a little bit better inland. It could be a bit of a lake issue as well. I'll have to look at that. Jeff Frame at the National Severe Weather Lab. Thanks, Patrick. I'll have to take a look at that and check it out. But progressing forward, let's go into Wednesday now. Wednesday, that's when we start to see those cells forming across Wisconsin. Get a sounding with the RFS there. There's your severe potential. Again, it's downplaying that tornado threat, which probably, I don't know, we'll have to see how that plays out. 3,100 joules of Cape. Very steep lapse rate from the surface to the third kilometer, but not really too high as you get higher in the atmosphere. Directional shear, it does exist with this, except it's weak at the surface. Surface winds seem relatively weak. But it also is displaying a few thunderstorms popping up across portions of Michigan as that main cluster starts to form with that low that's going to be making its way through. That's fascinating. Pop-up thunderstorms on Wednesday across southern Michigan. If those were to become severe, it'd likely be mainly in the form of downburst winds. That's probably what I would expect with those. Again, there's not really a well-defined lifting mechanism as those go through until we get to nightfall when that front starts to move through. Wednesday evening, marginal tornado potential, capping inversion starting to take hold, 1,800 joules of Cape, SRH getting around the 100 level. Weak directional shear, some speed shear in the mid-levels. Lapse rate's still pretty good at the surface to third kilometer. Does show some potential for some embedded supercells, though, making their way into southwest Michigan. Just taking a look around. Wish the 12Z would come in. It's going to take a while. The RFS does take a while to load. Let's see if the HRRR can get into Tuesday a little bit. Yeah, it can. What does the HRRR say? The HRRR says, yeah, maybe a storm pops up and maybe it becomes severe, but chances are really brief. It actually also has well, that's right, the Lake Superior shoreline, but it tends to bias a little bit weaker, I think, in most situations anyway, especially during the summer months. So I tend to kind of try to take a balanced view with more of the models than just these ones. But that's the overall outlook for the models right now. I want to take a look at the Cape, because I remember seeing an output across portions of the Midwest that was crazy. Like, corn sweat season is here, no doubt. We're going to go to the GFS for surface-based Cape instead. There's your Cape starting to build on Tuesday or Monday evening across Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa. Cape builds across the Upper Peninsula, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Then Michigan on Wednesday. Indiana and Ohio on Thursday. And maybe potentially in southern Indiana, southern Ohio on Friday. Then we're seeing, as we go forward, we kind of see multiple opportunities for just the instability to build across the Great Lakes. And you know what? Let's just take a dive in the long range just for fun. Again, getting into long range, you want to be cautious. But it is kind of interesting just to see how the models play out. Not confirming anything with the models that we're looking at right now. Northern Michigan. That would be interesting. If it were to verify, that's Wednesday, July 23rd. Across the Great Lakes region. Sounding with those storms does show an environment capable of maybe some severe weather. I do think it's going to be an active pattern in the next couple weeks. we're gonna get a couple days of some interesting storms, I would imagine. So that's why I was just saying I want to kind of look at the models live. But I'll leave it open to questions now as I kind of browse the models and look around. If you have questions, feel free to chime in. Curious to hear how things are going. Just as I look at the weather. If you have questions about the weather, questions about life in general. Let's look at the... What am I going to look at? Yeah, 23rd looks fun. The thing is about the 23rd, I might be working at a camp. I might. So that might be an issue with regards to chasing. The icon. Why not? What does the icon say about Wednesday? It plays it north. Van Buren County, marginal tour. Okay, so that's the icon. Now let's look at the 12Z. Might be a little bit of a southward play there. Yeah, we're having some nice sunshine out here. That's for sure. Oh yeah, Illinois is great chasing terrain. I chased, actually tomorrow is the anniversary of the July 15th derecho that, yeah, I chased 48 tornadoes into the Chicago area. That was insane. That was an insane chase day. I'll probably post some footage of that tomorrow because that was one of the craziest chases I have ever had. Gonna see if I can get a crew for Wednesday. I don't know yet. The wrap is probably not going to reach out to... Well, it might reach to Tuesday. What we got for the wrap on Tuesday? Give me a sounding there. Signals for severe weather, but again, overall threat is probably going to be marginal in nature. The GDPS model. What does it say? The Canadian model. Okay. Going to Wednesday. Again, showing that low making its way through. What kind of signals for severe weather are we getting? It's also showing those pop-up storms in Michigan, the GDPS. Again, this is the Canadian model. A little bit of increased SRH looks like on this one. Let's see if it carries over into Michigan as we get into the late night. Yeah, decent SRH, good cape. Not really good directional or speed shear, but again. Then we get to Thursday. There's those storms that are popping up across portions of Indiana and Ohio. It shows a greater amount of cape, but very low shear. Again, the short range model is really going to be the telltale for these systems that are going to be coming through. But I think I'll probably shut things down here for the live. It's time for lunch. Just figured I'd do a little bit of a live update with regards to the models. Thanks to those who have watched and tuned in. There will be a day at some point this week, and hopefully next week, where we will be chasing. I'm just not sure exactly how that's going to unfold just yet. So, just want to do a quick update for you all. Thanks for watching. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you all at the next live.